Good news for free speech. It's a baby step, but still, it's a step forward nonetheless. The Wildrose Party in Alberta, the official opposition there, has introduced a motion in the legislature to repeal the censorship provision of that province's hate speech law. That's the very same provision I was prosecuted under for 900 days for the high crime of publishing a news story about the Danish cartoon riots back in 2006 and showing photos of some of the cartoons to illustrate the news story. Seriously, 8 years later, that same censorship law is still on the books. Anyways, the motion was called Motion 502, and it was introduced by the party's justice critic, Shane Saskew. Now, this anti-censorship idea is just a motion, not a bill. The Wildrose doesn't have a majority there, but still, it's a welcome symbol of the party's commitment to free speech, which has been pretty wobbly lately. It's weird. There used to be a time when every party in Canada claimed to love free speech more than the others. Free speech was as Canadian as could be. It's been a core part of our British legal inheritance. Going back centuries, it was Section 1 of Diefenbaker's Bill of Rights, Section 2 of the Charter of Rights. But that's gone. The left has decided it doesn't really care about free speech anymore, at least not when it trumps the counterfeit human right not to have your feelings hurt. Maybe the left never actually believed in free speech other than for themselves. Don't believe me? Here's Rachel Notley, an Alberta NDP politician, debating the motion earlier this week.
The classic example of how this section has been potentially less than effective is the Lund case, which the Justice Minister referred to. And I found it particularly interesting because people got so involved in that case because of what I would argue were the very extreme opinions put forward on it by Ezra Levant. And I got to say, folks, choose your friends wisely, man. I just don't know that that's who needs to be driving your public policy decisions.
Now, I understand why the NDP doesn't like me. They're left-wing and I'm right-wing. But is that a reason to oppose freedom of speech? Is that a reason to support a censorship law? So I have extreme opinions. I think she means my anti-censorship opinion itself is extreme, but who knows? So does free speech only apply to official mainstream positions? Is that really a wise thing for anyone to say, let alone for a fringe political party? I mean, the NDP has never and will never be more than a fringe in Alberta. They got less than 10% of the vote last time. I think they're extreme. Does that mean they can be censored? But even if I were extreme and this Alberta NDP were the normal one, so what? Does it make any sense to say, oh, you don't want free speech because someone else who's extreme likes it too? There isn't any thinking anymore. That's just embarrassing by Rachel Notley. But as recently as 2011, progressive conservative Premier Alison Redford said free speech was her thing. She said that when she was running for Premier. She told me that on this very TV show. She said she'd repeal the censorship provision of the law if she became Premier. That was almost 3 years ago, and she's done nothing. It wasn't a casual promise. She also made that promise to the moderates at the Rocky Mountain Civil Liberties Association. Here, let me quote her in full. I want to amend and fine-tune the existing legislation after consultations with stakeholders to better define and protect free speech in light of challenges to the statute in recent years. Freedom of expression must be shielded, and Section 3 of the Alberta Human Rights Act should be repealed. Well, that's exactly what the Wildrose wants to do now. It's not extreme to oppose censorship. It's extreme to want censorship. Canada's Parliament recently repealed its version of this censorship law called Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act. The sky didn't fall. All that happened is that some government lawyers and government bureaucrats had to find some real work to do. And it won't fall in Alberta either. Does anyone actually believe that Calgary, that has voted twice for a brown Muslim liberal mayor like Naheed Nenshi, is a place seething with racism, that if it weren't for this censorship law, Calgary would explode into race riots? Give me a break. But maybe Rachel Notley has just never bothered to study the abuses and, what's that word? Oh, the extremism of the Human Rights Commission itself. Let me give you 3 quick examples. Here's the first. It's my own case where I was prosecuted for publishing those Danish cartoons in a news magazine. I mean, just listen to the first question that I was asked at my Human Rights Commission interrogation.
In an investigation interview, I always ask people, even though they've been as thorough as you have, in summary fashion, what was your intent and purpose of your article with the cartoon illustrations published on February 27, 2006?
Why is that a relevant question?
Exactly. What was my intentions? Why should my intentions matter? Why would a government officer ask me as a publisher for my intentions for publishing a news story? You ask a question like that if the answer is meaningful, as in something turns on it, as in there's a right answer or a wrong answer. That same officer interrogated me about my political and religious views, as if one answer would be okay, but another answer would be wrong, another answer would get me in trouble with the government. Stop and think about that for a second. I published a news story, and the government summoned me to an interrogation to ask me what my personal views and intentions were, and if I answered wrong, I would be prosecuted and punished. Sorry, who's extreme here, Rachel? That's the second example. But here's the second example. This guy, Pastor Stephen Bazan of Red Deer. He wrote a letter to the Red Deer Advocate newspaper opposing gay activism. And he wasn't diplomatic in his language. A lot of folks thought he was rude. That's freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, the whole shebang. A whole bunch of people wrote letters in response criticizing him. Great. But one extremist activist, a teacher named Darren Lund, didn't bother writing a letter. He took Pastor Bazan to the Human Rights Commission to censor him. And of course he won. So the pastor was ordered to pay Darren Lund thousands of dollars, even though Lund himself isn't gay, actually. But that's just money. The Human Rights Tribunal also ordered that Pastor Bazan be banned for the rest of his life from saying anything negative about gays, ever, in public or in private, in sermons or even in emails, saying anything negative, not just illegal or discriminatory, whatever that means, but saying anything ever for the rest of his life negative about gay politics. Oh, and it gets a notch better. The Human Rights Tribunal ordered Pastor Bazan to write a fake letter of apology and have it published in the Red Deer newspaper. They couldn't convince Pastor Bazan he was wrong, so they ordered him anyhow to make a jailhouse confession-style forced apology. It took nearly a decade before Pastor Bazan finally got this overturned on appeal. Sorry, Rachel, who's the extremist here? One last example, quick one, just to show what kind of place the Alberta Human Rights Commission is. See, I've told you how the Alberta Human Rights Commission is just a swamp of bitching, whining, grievance mongers. I've told you about how they hire people who express views that are, in my opinion, racist themselves. I told you about Musa Jawaji, a Human Rights Tribunal member who has published outrageous comments on Twitter, including a call to do DNA tests on immigrants to, quote, get rid of the bad ones, a man who said a constitution, quote, means dick. That's what he said. And I told you about Armin Chak, the Alberta Human Rights Commission in-house lawyer, who wrote bizarre letters to an extremist Pakistani magazine called Pakistan Link, where he said that Bangladesh was an illegal country because it broke up the Muslim state of Pakistan, where he disparaged India and Israel, two democracies, as law-breaking countries, where he called for the strengthening of the Ummah. That's the global Muslim superstate based on Islamic values, not secular values. By the way, a lot has happened since my last show on this subject a few weeks ago. Over 2,000 people have signed the petition at the website firemusa.ca to fire Musa Jawaji and abolish the Human Rights Commission. And just yesterday, those petitions were delivered to the three parties in Alberta. Armin Chak, the Human Rights Commission lawyer, has served the Sun with a libel notice for what I said about him. He's threatening to sue for exposing what he wrote and for criticizing him. But my last example today shows what kind of a swamp the Human Rights Commission has become. Last story, quick one, I promise. So a guy named Quinton Johnson was browsing for CDs a few years back in Red Deer. He came across a band called Deicide, which means God Killer in Latin, and they have a song called Kill the Christian. I'm not making it up. Here's a few lyrics of this song. Sorry to gross you out, but I just got to read it to you. Kill the Christian. You're the one we despise. Day in, day out, your words compromise lies. I will love watching you die. Kill the Christian, 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 kill the Christian. Armies of darkness unite, destroy their temples and churches with fire, and it goes on and on. Johnson also saw a song called, and I'm not kidding, Kill All the White People. Not a lot of poetry here. Here's one of the lyrics, pretty simple. Kill all the white people, then we'll be free. Hey, classy. That sounds like a song Sinatra might sing. So Johnson took the record store to the Human Rights Commission. He said they were, quote, spreading hate against white people and Christians. I mean, imagine if instead of saying kill all the white people, the song said kill all the Jews or kill all the blacks. Now, I should say, I am against censorship, even of vile, bigoted music like this. If you don't like it, don't buy it. Don't listen to it. If you're really mad, pick at the music store that's selling this crap. But don't go whining to the government. But Johnson did. I think he wanted to make a point. And here's the ruling issued by the Alberta Human Rights Tribunal. Yeah, I think Johnson did make a point. You tell me. Here is their ruling. This is the government speaking. While the tone and content of the communications appear to be on the face of them discriminatory, there is very little vulnerability of the target group, and the message is extremely suspect, lacks credibility, and has a small circulation. The context of the publication is not presented as a debate or any purportedly authoritative analysis, and the target group is not vulnerable. The vulnerability of the target group would be extremely limited, if at all, and the audience, including the exposed person, would be limited in nature and would only come into possession of these particular CDs in an overt act of volition on their own behalf. Don't those excuses go for just about every single hate speech case in this country's history? I mean, they're usually obscure websites. These aren't really reasons. They're excuses for not going after an anti-white, anti-Christian bigotry. See, that's the one perfectly acceptable hatred left, to hate white guys, especially Christians. You can say, kill them. You can say, hate them. You can fantasize about murdering and burning down their churches. You can sell that in a record store, and the so-called hurt feelings police will tell you to suck it up if you're a white Christian. But God help you if you dare to be a Christian pastor debating gay marriage, or a magazine publisher showing the news of Danish cartoon riots. I like Motion 502 from Alberta to strip away the censorship provision of the Human Rights Act, but that's nowhere near far enough. These places are kangaroo courts. They're full of bigots who are hypersensitive to criticism about their own conduct, but who tell the rest of us to suck it up when it comes to anti-Christian bigotry. Alberta's Human Rights Commission isn't Albertan in its spirit, and it doesn't promote human rights. It's a counterfeit Human Rights Commission, and it needs to be shut down.